Brad, a few weeks back in quarantine there, it's late at night. It's like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and I'm playing video games, and all of a sudden there's an earthquake. Ooh. And it is a significantly shaky enough earthquake where I jump up, grab my wife, I'm like, the kids! I'm like, I do one of these things, like quick doorways, that kind of thing. And thankfully it was not a big earthquake. It was only 3.8, but it was super local. Like it was high to the surface. Like Brad, I know you growing up in Michigan, no earthquake, so you know that the intensity of an earthquake is felt based on how far it is from you and how deep it was and what type of soil you're standing on, whether you're standing on a liquefiable sand surface or a rock surface. I know you know this, having grown up in Michigan.
All of this top of mind for a boy from Bad Axe.
This is the kind of stuff that they teach Michigan kids, from birth, is know your earthquakes, basically, right?
As a matter of fact, at the Bad Axe Memorial Hospital, in the waiting room for births, when somebody finds out that they've become a new father, a nurse comes out and just hands Dad a seismograph, and that's been going back for as long as I can remember. Sure,
it's a sweet Michigan tradition. I get it. So this is a guy. I know that I'm talking to a guy that knows his earthquakes. Anyway, so the earthquake scared the living. First of all, the fact that an earthquake is hitting during a pandemic, you want to turn to the earth and be like, read the room, not now.
Read the room.
Not an earthquake right now. Come on. Anyway, so the earthquake was not that bad. It was only 3.8, but it was a shallow earthquake, and it was like a half mile from my house. So it was very close, and so it felt bigger than it was. But it reminded me, Brad, of a story that I wanted to share with you. When I was in high school, back at one point in my life, I was athletic, right? I did a lot of sports and played a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
And I had, as all American sports do, a bunch of dumb, stupid, fake metal trophies,
Yeah.
All varying in size from 2 inches to 6 inches, right? And for whatever reason, high school me thought, I'm going to build a bookshelf, and I'm going to put it right over my bed. And so I built this wall bookshelf and had all these stupid trophies right over my bed, right, in high school.
Yeah.
And we had an earthquake one time at 3 or 4 in the morning. This was down in San Diego.
Oh.
And the way I experienced this earthquake was a shaking that woke me up, and then proceeded to get just the shit kicked out of me by a bunch of metal trophies falling. Boom, 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 boom. Ow, 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 ow. And each one of them is like a baseball guy holding a bat up, and so the bat goes right into your rib cage, or a soccer guy kicking a ball, and the ball goes right into your groin, and you're like, oh, God.
There's no end of pointy ends. And your luck, all of your sports were probably, golf, baseball, anything, high-a-lie, what do you call that?
High-a-lie, anything with a pointy stick.
Anything with a point to it, you were out there playing it, getting embedded by your trophies. And that's like being hoisted on your own petard.
By nature of the way earthquakes shake a thing, they didn't all just fall at once. It was like bam, 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 bam. And so I'm waking up in the middle of the night going, ow, 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 ow. And you're trying to parse what's happening. It just feels like somebody's got a sock full of pennies and just hitting you over and over again.
And all you can think is, I wish I wasn't so good at sports.
Why did God gift me with so much athletic talent?
That's so great. Well, I can imagine how scary that is. But then again, like you intimated in the beginning, you live in California, so I would imagine very quickly you put 2 and 2 together. There was an earthquake in Philadelphia just a few years ago, and I was sitting in my studio working, and I could feel the ground move. I don't have to explain an earthquake to you, but imagine being in Philadelphia, and growing up in Michigan, where I have never ever experienced an earthquake before. I thought the building was falling in. I thought we were like a sinkhole had opened up and the building was collapsing.
Oh, yeah. You thought it was a structural failure rather than anything earth-related.
Yeah. Whereas in California, within a couple seconds, you're like, oh, yeah, okay, this is an earthquake. I get it.
What's funny, though, is when earthquakes strike, not that we need to talk about earthquakes all day long, but in California, when earthquakes strike during the day, which is a very different feeling than when they strike at night when it scares the living bejesus out of you. But when it's during the day, you see Californians who have grown up or lived in California for decades, and you're reading other faces as the earthquake is happening. So it's like, I'm looking at you, Brad. We're talking about comics. and then it's a little bit of shaking, and we both stop and we look at each other, and then there's like the eyes kind of look 40 degrees up in the air for some reason. Like we're literally reading the earth. Like, all right, do we need to?
We need to.
Yep, we need to get outside. All right, let's go outside. All right, let's get in the doorway. Yep, all right. Okay, let's lie down under this table.
You're stopping 1 second from licking your finger and putting it up into the wind.
Yeah, because like if for one example, one time we had it happen during a business meeting at Mattel, and there's also you're gauging the level of professional embarrassment you want from being the one person to dive under the table versus like, all right, let's all handle this like adults. The earth is shaking. Maybe this is a good time to get underneath our $10,000 meeting table that Mattel's purchased. It's very solid wood.
This is a good time to review what year the building was built. That's something I've never wondered before, but now I am intensely interested in.
Oh, I was always very aware of the fact that Mattel's Creative Center was a repurposed Hughes aircraft building from World War II. And that thing was built out of spit and bailing water because they were like, let's beat the Germans and let's not worry about building safety. And so that building, like in an earthquake, it felt like the sky was coming down. You're like, oh, we're all going to die in this thing. This is a terrible building.
Well, actually, the architecture for that building is what inspired Tinker Toys, wasn't it?
Yes. You literally had the toy engineers going, all right, looking around this building. Well, this is all a big piece of shit. Let's make a toy called Tinker Toys.
If they can build a building out of it, we could take some swizzle sticks and a couple of wooden pucks, and we can do the same thing.
He sets aside all his jars of urine to go, I have an idea for a new building. Here we go.
Wait for me. I think just hear me out on this one. I think this could work.
Well, in true ComicLab tradition, you know it's time to open the show when we get to Howard Hughes' urine collection. So, hello everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the creator of Evil Inc. and the editor of Webcomics.com.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is brought to you by the nice people at Patreon.com/ComicLab. So, Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And specifically this week, let's focus on Patreon for a minute because we have got a special offer going from now until July 4th. Yeah. So for everyone that's at the $5 level on Patreon on July 4th at patreon.com/ComicLab, we have a unique sort of package of goodies for everybody at that $5 level. You're going to get 4 ebooks from Brad and I. Yeah. And Brad, those ebooks are going to be the How to Make Webcomics book, the ebook. Now, that book went through 4 printings at Image Comics. It was a huge success for them and for us. And you'll also get Brad's amazing follow-up hit to that one called the Webcomics Handbook. Yep. You're going to get Brad's most recent Evil Inc. graphic novel called Evil Inc. Under New Management. And you're going to get Drive Act 1, the hardcover ebook. It's not a hardcover. It's the ebook of the hardcover. You'll get that one for me. And then, as a very special treat, you're also going to get something, and Brad, I'll let you tell him about it, a little special treat with Brad and I.
Yeah, it's going to be Cocktails with ComicLab. We've been looking at all these Zoom meetings, and we thought, that's really perfect for the next version of our Drunk Comic Lab series. We're going to do Cocktails with Comic Lab. We're going to have a couple of nice, tasty adult beverages, and we're going to be talking about sharing some stories, kind of doing some not necessarily instructional, although we can go that way, but just kind of hanging out and chatting. Plus, now that everybody's got Zoom and getting used to learning how to use it, we're going to have you folks in the room with us, in the Zoom room, and you can have cocktails with us. So it's like a way for you to kind of participate in a way in a Drunk Comic Lab episode.
And so in addition to that, Cocktails with Comic Lab, you, of course, at the $5 level of Patreon are also going to get every one of our episodes early as they come out. You're going to get 50-plus hours of ProTips, which is a podcast that we have recorded exclusively for Patreon members. And then you're going to be able to ask a question of the show at the $5 level. So that's 4 ebooks, Cocktails with Comic Lab, every show early, 50 hours of pro tips, and you'll get to ask the show a question, all for the $5 level when you join up on the 4th of July. So join us for the special offer. It is a great time. And I'm specifically excited for that Cocktails with Comic Lab. I think that's going to be really fun.
That's going to be there's a lot of potential in that whole concept.
And I want you to know, really when Brad and I were throwing titles back and forth at each other, one of Brad's suggested titles, before he very successfully landed on Cocktails with Comic Lab, he said, "What about Drinks with Dinks?" And I was like, "No, we're not calling it Drinks with Dinks."
Well, it does have a certain kind of rhythm to it.
Drinks with Dinks.
Drinks with
Drinks with
Dinks.
Dinks sounds like a 1950s like comedy with like Jerry Lewis. Huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Jerry Lewis is the Dink.
Right. Yeah.
Right after his successful The Bellboy and The Patsy is Jerry Lewis as the Dink. It's such a 19 like early rather mid 1900s insult. Like after 1970 or so, you didn't hear people calling each other Dink unless you were on a fourth grade playground, right?
Yeah.
After that,
really,
it really kind of leveled off. And I think it's time for us to bring it back.
Up until the 1950s, there was such a pleasant, like, alter universe of what you could say in broadcast media for an insult that filtered down into daily Americana, you know?
Yeah.
And so you never heard curse words, obviously, in broadcast media, either on radio or TV or film. And so you got words like dink being propagated, which were like, what a weird and wonderful word that is.
Yeah. It's a delight. I mean, how could you be upset about being called a dink? It's very... It almost cute. It's like pink and ink and think. There's nothing bad that's an ink that I can think. I'm sure there'll be something somebody's going to point out.
Of course, we've made this joke before, but we're gonna research this word and find out that it's something incredibly racist from 1920, and we're like, whoa, yikes! What did we say?
You always get a little bit scared of making sweeping statements, but yeah, it's a cute word. So listen, Dave.
Yes,
I've got a question. This is something that I've been seeing going all over Twitter for the last week and a half, and I want to talk to you about it because it's fascinating to me. Right now, a lot of colleges and universities, including art schools, are announcing that in fall they're going to be switching to digital literacy, digital classes. Okay,
right.
In other words, they're not, because of the COVID pandemic, they're not going to be having in-person classes because that's obviously going to be too dangerous until a vaccine can be developed and tested. And that's not going to happen by fall. Okay?
No.
So it's not going to be safe for people to go out and show up to classes like they used to. So a lot of colleges are making what I think is the wise decision, since people's lives are on the line, to say, you know what, we're not going to show up in class. We're going to do this like we did the second half of the spring semester and do these digitally. At which point, Dave, a lot of people took to Twitter. And they started saying, listen, if you're going to go to art school, specifically these people are talking about art school, and I think we can extrapolate a little bit, but for ComicLab, let's talk about art school. If you're going to be going to art school and they're going to be doing digital classes, half the reason you show up to art school is for in-person, on the hands-on kind of training with professionals, and for the networking you're going to be doing with a whole new crop of new professionals that are going to be going out finding jobs, and those people are going to reach back to you and say, hey, I found this thing, I got this idea, I know this person. Half the reason you're doing it is for the networking and for the in-person hands-on training. If you're going to be spending the large amounts of money that an art school requires and they're going digital, you should consider not doing it. And instead, I've seen all kinds of suggestions from study YouTube tutorials and instructionals that you can get on Gumroad. You should go to community college and get rid of your prerequisite courses. I've seen a lot of people with a lot of suggestions, but they all amount to the same thing. You should not be going to art school while it's a digital version of the instruction. And I want to ask you, Dave, what do you think about that?
So this is a fascinating question, and is, frankly, Brad, without historical precedent. Like even in the Spanish flu, they didn't necessarily know the wherewithal of. Some people did. Medical professionals did know the advantage of social distancing, or at least of crowds, and they had an idea of germ theory, and they had an awareness that masks helped, and all that sort of stuff in the Spanish flu, but. They didn't necessarily go, all right, all classes are shut down at Harvard. We'll see you next year. That kind of thing.
Right.
In some respects, this is new, both because higher education is more widespread and is more, even though it's incredibly expensive, it is more available than it was at 1918, right? So we can agree to that.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is this is a new question, and people haven't really faced this before in history. in the same way that we're doing now on a mass scale. Like we talked about in a previous show that, of course, during the great plagues of the 16th century and 17th century, that Oxford and Cambridge was shut down, and that's how we got things like gravity and certain inventions, because people went home from Oxford and Cambridge, and so yes, schools did shut down. But specifically to this one, when you know what's ahead of you in terms of digital learning, and you know that it's still going to cost you $20, $30, $40, sometimes upwards of $50,000 a year to do certain schools, and what you're getting is essentially peer and one-on-one teacher YouTube tutorials. It's a weird proposition to not go, maybe take a year, maybe go to community college, maybe work somehow locally with your folks, or stay with your folks, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Or it's hard not to advise taking a year in some fashion from your education, or doing, like Brad said, a community college, which I do think is a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're a freshman or a sophomore, my God, do community college. This is the year to do, if there was ever a year to do community college, this is a year to do it. But if you're a junior or a senior, and your mom and dad somehow are willing to let it slide in their life and your life, maybe take a year, because it is not necessarily worth it to physically go to a school when it's only a digital distance learning and you're paying $35,000 a year. Brad, what are you thinking?
I've got so many thoughts on this. First of all, I as I've said on the show before, I teach at the college level. So I was one of those people, one of those professors that was switching midway through the semester to digital learning. And on one hand, I totally get the argument that says it's not the same, right? On the other hand, I'm telling you, everything that I did, I scaled way back because of the pandemic. But in terms of what I was able to do, everything I was able to do in terms of my lectures and in terms of like writing assignments and giving feedback on those assignments, I was able to do almost to the same exact degree digitally. In fact, in some cases, it was better because I did a bunch of my lectures and I posted them on YouTube. So now, not only could you watch that lecture the first time through, which I encouraged, you could go back and watch it again and catch something that you missed, or, kind of pause and think about something. So you've got that, those lectures have a certain element of usability that a lecture doesn't, including the fact that the people that were in my 10 o'clock class on Monday morning didn't have to be there at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. They could make that class fit for whatever their schedule was. And that's a plus, number one. Number two, and by the way, I can see both sides of this really well. But the other thing that we got to take into account is that people say, well, it's about art school, it's about networking. It's all about networking. The difference is we network digitally today.
True.
Right? How much of our networking is on social media, texting? How much of our networking is absolutely digital?
Yeah, but I'm gonna correct you there, though.
Okay.
And I will use this show as a launch point for this discussion. Yes, all of our networking is digital. You and I haven't seen each other physically for over a year, right? All of our networking is literally digital, but 99.9% of the guests that we've had on this show, for example, Brad, we have met at some point in our life, right? And that is still critically important for developing a human relationship, is to see someone. I know it's stupid, but not even hugging or shaking hands, but just physically standing 3 feet away from someone, you get the make of them in your mind in a way that you never get digitally. And then it's imprinted on your relationship forever after. So then you can interact digitally. But I will say it's weird to interview someone that we've never met before. It's different, don't you think, than someone that we've met even once passingly?
I'll say I agree with you, but you and I are in our 50s, and the people that we're talking about are in their 20s, and they've got a completely different experience in life than you and I do.
Well, okay, so can I do a quick counterpoint to that? And this is critically important. Yes, Brad is in his 50s. I'm 46. That's critically important that we establish that.
What are you, 49? I lose track.
Long before COVID, I've always been saying Brad's got one foot in the grave. So yes, we can all agree on that. I'm still young and virile at 46.
46. Okay, well, that is a significant difference.
I'm still collecting highlight trophies, Brad, and putting them over my bed. That's me.
You never learn. You put them right back over the bed, didn't you?
No earthquake's gonna get me. Right back on the shelf it goes. Boy, I'm sure glad I took this knitting trophy with these long sticks.
Yeah, with the big knitting needle sticking right straight up.
Right above my bed. Yes. So I know that younger people, and I know that's true because they're also able to date and to marry people that they've met digitally. And I find that so weird. Like that to me is so foreign and strange. So I get that happens. But for me, it's also a question of one of the things that you're paying for. It's not just peer group. It's not just access to a professor. It's also you're paying for the physical network that a university or an art school provides. The large, airy studios, the painting tripods that are gigantic, the clay kilns that you would never be able to fire something at home in your home oven, but you can do a clay kiln at this school. The computer software that costs thousands of dollars that can do editing on an Avid machine that you couldn't do film editing at home on your MacBook Air, whatever it is. You get what I'm saying is that part of that $30,000 is paying for all these supplies. And yes, like life, art finds a way. Even in a tiny little kitchen, you will make art but one of the reasons you're trying to go to a university or an art school ostensibly is to expand your mind and expand your possibilities with all these new materials that you wouldn't otherwise be exposed to from people that know how to use them and can show you in a hands-on way how to use them properly. And for all those reasons, I just think this is the year of any year in history to take a buy year. Now, here's where this thought immediately triggers guilt in my heart is that means a lot of schools are going to go bankrupt this year.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of schools are going to go bankrupt this year.
You're going to see a lot of universities putting up the white flag, art schools and otherwise,
and I
that
don't
were
know
on
what
the
that,
cusp.
Frankly, I don't even know if deans and provosts and school presidents know what that means yet, but it means a lot of bankruptcies, and I don't know how they offer up their assets in the process of bankruptcy to survive. Like, I don't know what they'll say to a bank, like, well, we don't really need this gym anymore. You can have that. I don't know what they do. So
on the other hand, you were just saying you don't have a kiln at home, and I know where you might be able to pick one up cheap.
Yeah. Here's a $20,000 kiln. You can get it for $50. Must haul away and own U-Haul. That's the eBay listing.
Well, listen, as much I've really enjoyed, I haven't landed solidly, although I'm going to be completely honest with you, talking just from myself. Like I was telling you before we started recording, my older son is a junior in high school. Right. If he was a senior in high school right now and we were making this decision, absolutely, we would either be looking at community college or taking a buy year. Without a doubt, I would.
And that's the most honest way to answer this question is, if it was your own kids, how would you do it? And if it was my kids, I would say take a buy year. I'm going to give you a reading list. I'm going to have you do support the family by working around the house and helping out and doing XYZ. And you're going to read really deeply with a list I'm going to give you. And we're going to, but then again, that's a point of privilege in a family that we could probably support the kid, And so there's a lot of families that can't do that. And so it's an incredibly difficult question and wrapped up with a lot of considerations. But I think if ever there was a year to do community college or to do a buy year, this would be it.
The only thing I want to throw in there real quick before we wrap this up and go on to our next, because we've got a really good Patreon question that I want to get to yet today. Before we wrap that up, I do want to say this. I see a lot of people say this, and they say, listen, you don't need to go to art school, which, by the way, all the way back to Webcomics Weekly, I've kind of said the same thing, especially for comics, is that it's not a necessity. It's not like some other professions where you need to have that degree to get in the door. Right. This is one of those things that if you can do the work, you can do the work, right? If you got a great portfolio, you're going to get a job. You're going to be able to either get a job or make your own stuff happen, self-publishing. But here's what I have a problem with when I see a lot of these people saying you don't need art school, you don't need this, you don't need that. You can just do a YouTube video. You could just download tutorials on Gumroad. That's all absolutely true, but it assumes something about you, the person listening, that may not be true. And you got to be honest with yourself about this. Are you a self-starter?
Yeah.
Can you do something that doesn't have a deadline and a grade attached to it? I can tell you from just wrapping up the semester, I made my class the lowest possible bar to walk over, to saunter over. I still had people that could not, and it was literally like over the course of 45 days, it was the equivalent of an afternoon of fiction writing and an email, right? I still had people that could not finish, or, could not meet that deadline, could not bring themselves to finish it. If you're not the type of person who's a real self-starter, if you're not an independent worker, that whole YouTube and Gumroad path is going to be a disaster for you. And you got to be honest. Are you the person that needs someone standing over you saying, you got to have this done by Friday and I'm going to be grading it? That's the kind of pressure some people actually need. Doesn't mean you're a good person or a bad person. It just means you're wired a certain way, and you got to be honest with yourself. Don't look at these people telling you you don't need art school, you can just watch YouTube videos if you're not the right type of person for that approach.
Yeah, and I think I've been pretty consistent in this too, is that much more than saying go to art school, I've always kind of said get a liberal arts degree, a broad and well-grounded liberal arts degree, and then within that, take a ton of art classes if you'd like. But you will be better served over the course of your life and over the many careers that you will try to tackle with a liberal arts degree than you will with an art school degree, which I think is more limiting and is not as welcoming into many job markets as you would hope, when you get out. So anyway, that puts a button on that. It's not a happy topic. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of happy topics around how do you handle life right now in terms of things that have gone before. But I think it is. I'm glad a question was asked because it's a topic that a lot of parents and young students in their 20s are facing. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Well, Brad, turning into our next question, I should remind everybody that today's show is brought to you by the good folks over at Wacom at wacom.com, the makers of the Wacom One. Both Brad and I have been using the new Wacom One in quarantine to great effect. In fact, I can imagine Brad sitting fireside in quarantine, a little snifter of brandy, a hunting hound at his feet.
That's right.
Probably a bearskin rug. Brad's there in his satin pajamas and the Wacom One on his lap.
It's actually a satin rug, and I'm there in my bare skin, but you're close.
Oh, I had it wrong. A key detail. Oh, mwah. I'm so glad for that correction. Brad's sitting there sniffing his, and he motions to his dog, "Come, Major Tom, it's time to draw by the fire." And Major Tom, who's a 10-year-old hound, a beautiful dog,
beautiful.
Brad has hunted with for years.
Oh,
and God,
yes.
Imagine Brad Geiger hunting. Anyway,
imagine Brad Geiger doing anything that relies upon you to go outside in the cold weather. Imagine Brad Geiger shoveling snow. It's hard to do. It's like I stand there by the window saying it's gonna melt.
So imagine 10-year-old Brad, like all his cousins. Come on, Brad, we're gonna go ice fishing in Bad Axe, Michigan. And Brad's like, nope. I'm going to draw Spider-Man again.
Way.
Thanks very much.
I'm going to stay inside and read my comic. That's exactly what it was. They were convinced I was gay for about 25 years. When I brought a girl home for the first time, Mom called the neighbors over, called it was like line up and see the girl. Everybody lined by. She sold tickets at the front like a carnival barker. They were, because of two things. I didn't like fishing, and I didn't like hunting, and I didn't like football, and I couldn't count very well.
And counting was also a big problem. God. But yeah, everything in the North Midwest that was like a signifier, you were like, no, I like Spider-Man. Thanks very much.
Something wrong with my uncles were sure that there was in their worldview something wrong with me.
Yeah, but now
who's laughing at who? That's right.
Who's laughing at Brad? Can you imagine Brad? Ha ha! With your bowling and your hunting. As you put another cowl on Batman.
Can you imagine Wacom listening to this? This is what we're paying for, these guys. They're talking about football.
These two jokers, what?
But I do have to say,
we're finding literally any other podcast about comics. That's what we're going to find.
I do have to say, there's so many people in the Discord server that are saying that they're either they bought their Wacom one, or they're just trying to put a couple things in. Like one person saying, I want to make sure I got the right computer set up for it. I want to make sure I'm ready, and I get the, because they're like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get a new laptop while I'm at it.
Right, yeah.
There's so many people talking about their Wacom ones in the Discord server. And like I say, if this is you, drop us a note on social media, because it absolutely tickles the people at Wacom pink that you folks are enjoying that drawing tablet as much as you are, and the great things you're sharing. So thank you so much for sharing that fun news with us.
And thank you to the folks over at Wacom at wacom.com for sponsoring today's and future shows. And we appreciate it so much. And Brad, jump us into the next question, my friend.
And thank you to Declan Koneski, who says, by the way, Declan Koneski says you actually pronounced his name correctly last time that he had a question on the show.
Well, if there's one thing that Dave Kellett is good at, it's pronouncing names like Declan Koneski. So there we go.
Well, Declan has another good question here, and I'm going to read it off for you. It says, several episodes ago, there was talk about hand lettering, and part of the discussion turned to selling original pages.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could discuss this, your experiences, as well as maybe some other artists' experiences. My suspicion is that gag strips typically sell better as they are self-contained and can resonate well, while long-form pages are out of context and thus pretty hard to sell. I'm coming to this because I do a long-form story in watercolor, but I letter in Photoshop, and maybe this is the push I need to do everything 100% digital. So what do you think? Let's talk about original art, specifically where it comes into lettering.
This is a great question for a lot of reasons, especially if you're on the fence about whether or not to go digital.
Yeah.
For me, like with Sheldon, having original art has been one of the two key factors that's kept me doing analog pen and ink on paper. Also, there is the tactile joy that I get from drawing Sheldon analog. I still like Drive. There is a unique joy in being able to create via Photoshop and via digital means virtually anything you want to create, because the brushes are myriad, right? And you can do virtually anything with layers and gradients and all sorts of techniques that you can't do in pen and ink. But there is still something lovely about being able to do, for lack of a better phrase, the best you can with pen and ink, and then it stands as an original, right? So, but for somebody like Declan who's on the fence on it and trying to figure out, will I go all digital and all that portends with the possibilities and the brushes and the layering and the gradients, or with the thought that I might still sell originals, do I stay with pen and ink? And I think, Declan, the truth is that you were onto something when you're asking about standalone pages that hold their own, right? And so a lot of those are gag strips or comic strips or, frankly, certain pages within a long-form story that themselves tell a story within that one page. And we all know as comic creators what I'm referring to there. Whether it be a splash page or a unique page of dialogue where there is a start, a middle, and an end just so happens on that one page, right?
Yeah.
And so what I think you're hitting on there, Declan, is actually a truth, which is that if you're telling a long form story, it's harder and less meaningful for consumers for them to jump in on original art than it would be for buyers of gag strips or comic strips or self-contained comics. Yeah. I find that my Sheldons the ones that are not part of a storyline, the ones that are standalone, the ones that appeal to a very specific audience or a voice or a type of joke will be picked up by the person that responds to that, because it is self-contained and it sits on a wall in their house or in their office lobby or in their waiting room or wherever. And so people can look at it. They get the whole story of what that comic is. They're in and they're out, and you can see why that's sold, right? Yeah. So Drive, I do have 30 or 40 pages of originals from Drive, which was first drawn in pen and ink. And then I quickly realized, Starfields take forever. To hell with this. I'm bringing this onto a Wacom and digitally, and I'm going to draw this in Photoshop.
Yeah.
But I still have 30 or 40 pages. And the truth is, they didn't sell great at first. Yeah. If I made them available now, they would probably sell well because there's only like 10 left. And so I saved them for Kickstarters, if that makes sense. But the truth is, Sheldon's move quickly as original art. Drive's always sat on the shelves. And Brad, I think that kind of mirrors your experience. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about selling original art.
Without a doubt. I had originals. I had a long love-hate relationship with originals. I sold my original art, and I stand by this. Original art is original art. It's a one-of-a-kind item. So you cannot let it go cheaply. And originally, I had mine at $100 a strip, and nobody touched it. And so then I brought it down to $80 a strip. Nobody touched it, And I did all kinds of tricks. It's $80 online, but at a comic convention you'll get it for $60. Still nobody touched it. And I was always doing original art. I'm sorry, that didn't make any sense. I was always doing original art, but digital lettering. So I looked at that one time at a comic convention, and I thought, that's why they're not. So it isn't the fact that this is not a standalone piece that is impenetrable. The reason they're not buying my brilliance is that it doesn't have the lettering done on it. So then I came up with a system, and it took me like 45 minutes to process one strip. But I would come up with a system where I would print out the digital lettering on a sheet of clear plastic, acetate, and then I would line that up with the strip, and then tape them both together with acid-free tape, and then mat it so it looked really good, and it looked like an animation cell. I remember standing in convention halls all the time telling people, it looks just like an animation cell. Nobody bought it. Nobody wanted anything to do with it, and it was taking me 45 minutes a piece to do these. So finally, I just started not selling them, finally made the switch to digital. It made it that much easier for me to make that decision where I'm like, listen, why am I worrying about making all these originals? They don't sell like Kellett's do. I stand next to him at Comic-Con. He's selling them. I'm not. There must be a difference there. And I still think it's that whole standalone part of it, because even Evil Inc. at that point was you had to the storyline was a rolling storyline. One strip didn't really stand on its own at that point in my career. Right. So as I've talked about on the show, later on, I started offering those as Patreon rewards, and amazingly, that stuff that I couldn't sell at comic conventions becomes really, really popular Patreon rewards. And just as a button on this for my own personal journey, I've long since run out of the originals that I experimented with hand lettering for about a year to see if I could become good at it. Spoiler alert, I couldn't. But
hold on. I want to correct that. You could, and you still can. It's a time thing. Like with anything, it's like saying I could become good at guitar in a year. No, you can't.
Right.
It just
right.
It's I
was getting
time.
There, and towards the end, it was getting better. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
You're fair.
It was.
But I was not going to put that amount of time into it. And I finally got to the point where it was like, I still have Patreon backers who want originals. I've gone through most of the hand-lettered originals. And so what I did very simply, and I'm amazed I never kind of thought of it 20 years ago. I just took the same blue pencil that I did the sketches in and hand lettered in the words, not necessarily like even do the measurements and everything. I just jot the words down inside whatever negative space there might be in that panel, and so that I always think of the end result. Somebody's going to be hanging this in a bathroom somewhere, and they want to be able to read it. right?
Right.
Having no words in there defeats that. Unless your art is spectacular, or you're a notable artist, or you're working on a notable property like Spider-Man, then you don't have any real reason to frame comic art without lettering. So I just put it in blue pencil. It goes over marvelously. I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and nobody said boo about it. It's just like,
no one
yeah,
said boo about it, and that's been a big thing. It's like, are people going to say boo about this? You know, and no one has said boo about it.
No one has said boo.
No one has said boo, and Brad and I were concerned about it. Like, are people going to say boo about this? And no one has said boo.
Have you never heard that figure of speech? Nobody.
That must be some Midwesternism that I'm not like. No one. It just seems like such a weird phrase.
Nobody has said boo about it.
No, what? Now, give me the context of like, what? Why would someone say boo? Like, well, this is a bad thing. Boo.
All right, here we go. Just say, here's some original art.
Oh, Brad. Well, here's some original art.
Boo.
oh, you see it. Oh, no one says boo about it, like booing a bad thing at an audience.
Yeah, nobody said boo.
I heard boo in my mind as like a tiny little floating Casper ghost going,
like
boo!
It goes, here's some original art. Boo!
Boo! That's what I heard. And I don't know why it was like a little ghost, like a Casper floating in the air, southern going, boo! No one's going to say boo about it. Boo!
Boo! Boo, y'all!
Boo, y'all. So what a weird phrase. No one's going to say boo about it.
Nobody said boo about it.
Anyway, so the good news is no one has said boo about it to Brad. That's the important takeaway for this week's show is if you were wondering, has anyone said boo to Brad about his original art? No one has said boo to Brad about his original art. No one said boo about it. Sometimes I imagine a listener from like Australia or the UK listening to the show like, what the hell is this Americanism? No one has said boo about it.
Yeah, we could do just a whole show on idioms.
Oh my God!
and never run out of topics.
But yeah, I mean, looking back on my own history, just to reemphasize this point, one of the reasons, Declan, that I transitioned from original art to digital was, yes, of course, there was technical things that I could do digitally quicker, faster, and more capably digitally that I couldn't do original art-wise. But also, I think one of the factors was, I'm doing all this work to create a pen and ink original art page, and these damn things aren't selling. And they were taking me like 3, 4, 5 times longer than it would take me to do a Sheldon original art page.
Yeah.
And so I was like, why am I beating my head against the wall for this? People are clearly saying boo to this. And so now I'm going to try to work that into my own career. People were saying boo to it, Declan. That's what they were saying. They were looking at my Drive original art pages, and they were saying boo. They were saying boo. And so that transitioned me to digital, and frankly, I'm not looking back on it. Do I have any regrets on making Drive digital? No, 1,000%. I have zero regrets on that.
Yeah, here's the bottom line, Declan. Which process allows you to have a better final product? That's going to make your decision. It doesn't matter, what about my original art sales? What about this? What about that? None of that means squat. Here's what it comes down to. Which one gets you the better final comic?
Yes. And you know what, Brad? I will say this too. Drive has a cleaner line because I'm drawn digitally, right? It has less imperfections. And that's a quality of that digital process, but it's also a quality that people like in Drive. Yeah. Sheldon has more imperfections, lines that cross out of panels, for example, lettering that's imperfect, and line work that's energetic, but clearly more sketcherly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that is, frankly, a quality of doing original art and doing it, and so people like that. I like that for Sheldon. So it's also, what are you trying to achieve with your art? And to Brad's point, what produces a final product that you're prouder of? And then also, I will tag on to Brad's by saying, what brings you more joy in doing the process? Because you will keep doing it. You will do it with your best energy if drawing with pen and ink makes you happy, or if drawing digitally makes you happy. So follow your bliss on that, because better art will come from following your bliss. Don't you think, Brad?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it looks like, looking at the clock on the wall, we got time for another $5 Patreon question. You ready for this?
That was the most radioism you've ever done, because just so everyone knows, I'm in a closet with no clocks. Brad is under a blanket with no clocks. So him saying, looking at the clock on the wall, nobody has a clock. I'm going to say boo to that. No one has a clock.
You've been waiting to say boo. Well, listen to, here's something that you can say yay to. This is a question that came in from Jay Pereira, who says, in this age of heightened digital connection, how do you disconnect from tech with all the notifications and temptations to focus on the task at hand and your overall productivity? How do you disconnect, Dave, when so much of what we do means being connected?
Oh, this is a great question because it is a truth not only to cartoonists, not only to artists, but to everyone in the modern age is there are key moments where either productivity or mental health requires you to disconnect.
Yeah.
And boy, is it hard at times. So yes, let's talk about some strategies that I use to make this possible. A key one for me, and it frankly was a nice turning point in my life 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I don't remember when, is I sort of made a decision that the only notifications I want turned on my phone are someone that I know and love physically reaching out to me. So Brad calling me, my phone rings. My wife texting me, my phone rings. Do I get a tweet response? Nope, no notification for that. Do I get somebody liked one of my Instagram posts? Nope, don't give a shit. Don't notify me for that. Because you could be swimming in notifications with all those non-essential, non-consequential bits of information that you can take a moment during your day to go check on. So once a day, if I'm lucky, I'll go check Instagram. Once a day, many times a day, I'll go check Twitter. But I'm going to it. It's not coming to me.
Right.
Versus the three that I do allow notifications to come in on are email, although I a little bit regret that I let that one sneak in. But definitely phone and text. And that's my key factor because then once I go to write or I go to draw and I sit in my little writing chair and my dog hops on my lap and I get a cup of coffee and I go to write, I just turn off the volume on my phone, put it face down so the light can't be seen and it can't be heard. And then it is like I am by myself again, you know? Brad, what are your strategies for not letting notifications overwhelm you, especially when you're trying to be productive? Which I think is the core of what Jay is asking, right?
Oh, yeah. This is amazing because you and I have never had this discussion, and yet we have both solved the problem in exactly the same way.
Really? Is that true? Oh, wow.
I've come up with the same approach, and I do it for exactly the same reasons. I turned all my notifications off on all my social media. There's not a bit of that needs to be done right now.
No.
Right?
Or that needs to intrude on your mind, yeah.
Right. Now, having said that, on the advice of Jake Parker that was giving me some Instagram advice one time, he said, like, when he makes a post, he'll keep Instagram open on his phone for another 20 minutes or 30 minutes after he makes that post, because that's the time, that first hour or so, it's really important that if you're getting engagement, that you respond to it and you drum it up. If you kind of hit the social media lottery and people are responding a lot, you want to be responding back and engaging really solid in that first 30 minutes to an hour. Okay. Right. So I will do that, especially on something like Instagram and Twitter. But for the most part, I've turned notifications off on every social media that I own. And it's by the way, at great personal annoyance, because every time I open one of these up, they're always begging me, hey, you want to turn notifications on? You want to turn notifications on? You know what? We noticed you didn't have notifications. Would you like to turn those on? And the more they ask, the more I'm convinced that I'm making the right decision, keeping those notifications off.
Yeah, because it triggers all those, I'm blanking on the psychological term, but those casino realities, the noise, the binging, the lights, it draws your eye back to the thing to make it more socially addictive, you know?
Yep.
And so I'm actively trying to turn all that addictiveness off. And so that when I'm mentally ready or schedule-wise, I'm ready to go check in on Twitter, then I go. Not because Brad responded, and I've got to see what Brad responded to, you know, even though I love Brad, I've got to see what Brad responded to right now, not an hour from now, you know, who cares?
Yeah.
Brad
well, and the other thing is, like you said, emails, I'll still get notifications because I get a lot of business information, like my
and some
print
of it is
vendor.
time sensitive. When you say
to a degree, that's the point I was going to make. To a degree, like when I'm working, same thing. That phone goes face down because I've gotten over my history hundreds of very important time-sensitive emails. There's not a one of them that I couldn't have answered maybe 15 minutes later than I did. or an hour late. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's not a one of them. And the funny thing is, we've all got this thing in our head that says, I'm going to get an email that I'm going to need to respond to in the next 30 seconds, or else I'm going to miss some great opportunity.
The president of publishing is going to call me and say, Brad Geiger, we're ready to sign you up, that kind of thing.
And there are, maybe there's one, hey, we just realized we wanted to have you as a guest on our podcast. If you would have been there, that would have been great. And if not, we'll do it some other time. There's every now and again, there's something that slides under the radar for that kind of thing. But for the most part, there's nothing that you're going to get an email about that you can't answer in another hour or so later. There's nothing that you need to do right now.
And then, so Brad, that point is excellent with Brad.
Yeah.
And I would also say this, is that in addition to limiting things to the people in your life reaching out to you, phone, text, and email.
Yeah.
You can also help your email inbox by, frankly, unsubscribing to every damn thing you can imagine in your life that is currently sending you an email. Because anytime that bing goes off in the middle of your writing, it is a microsecond to a minute of you going, don't answer that, don't answer that, just ignore it. So turn those off, and then turn off everything for sale notifications. Hey, Costco's having a sale on lawn chairs. Hey, Walmart's having a sale on underwear. Hey, Sephora's having a sale on lipstick. What, Brad? Go ahead.
You just, here's what you do, especially if you've got Gmail. Just search for a phrase in your email. For every time somebody sends you an email that starts with the words, "in these troubling times," just every time you find that phrase, unsubscribe. Hit spam, gone, delete. Every time somebody sends you an email that says, "in these troubling times, in these uncertain times," gone. I don't need to hear from you either, because that they're up to no good. They're just out to try to make you feel just soft enough that you're going to buy a lawn chair for them because of the COVID. You just get rid of all that stuff. Like Dave says, all that stuff you don't need, because what it is it pings, and then like Dave said, you go, well, I'm not gonna answer that. I'm working right now. And then 30 seconds later, your brain goes, wonder what it was though.
Yeah.
And now your concentration is shot.
It might have been the president of publishing, and then you're like, no, I'm not finishing. And then you're not working on your dialogue anymore. Now you're trying to check that email.
It could have been the prime minister of webcomics telling me that I'm the next big thing.
That's right, yeah. And so turn off all the damn sale notifications from all these places, because frankly, you don't need them anyway. You don't need to be spending money. None of us need to be spending money in that regards right now anyway. In these troubling times, please buy a burger from Burger King, these kind of things. You don't need that. And so also frankly, I would turn off news notifications, which are another big sap. That one, if you're in a writing mood, you're like, I'm feeling creative, got a little coffee going through me. Oh, look at how the federal government is messing up coronavirus. Well, that's great. Thanks, news notifications. A new way that I wasn't familiar with how they were messing this up. That's great. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, now I'm going to write again. And then you have 5 minutes of wasted time as you have an existential dread, So don't turn off news. Go to news is, again, one of those things. Go to it. Don't let it come to you.
That's the main point of everything that has to do with your phone and social media and tablets, etc. You need more you go to stuff and less come here stuff.
Yeah, that's a great way to put that.
More stuff that you go to on your own terms. And I know people, I'm never organized enough to do this, but I know people that do it. They go, okay, between 2 and 3 o'clock, that's social media time. I'm doing all my social media time between 2 and 3. Or they've got different times that they'll go out and do that sort of thing. And then they limit it. And then when it's over, boom, back to work. Not going to turn it off. And you've got to battle your own FOMO there, your own fear of missing out. Oh, maybe there's a big hashtag on Twitter that I'm missing. But come on, again, what do you hear from Dave and I all the time? This is a marathon, not a sprint. There's nothing that you're going to do in the next 5 minutes that's as important as what you're going to do over the next 5 years.
Right. And frankly, there's no conversation on Twitter so snappy that it was worth you not producing your next comics page, you know? And that's sometimes what the trade-off is yep, you didn't miss it. You didn't miss that email, or you didn't miss that Twitter conversation, but guess what? You didn't produce as much as you could have produced today, and that's a bummer.
Yeah. Or the thing you did produce was not as great. That punchline you were working on, you could have actually spent another couple hours making it funny And instead, you said something clever on Twitter. Well, which of these are you in the game for?
Yeah. I'm in great admiration of. I'm not there yet, and I probably never will be there. But I'm in great admiration of those people that have set a specific hour of the day, or some people I know. I think it's Kazu Kibuishi who had. I think it was Kazu who had a whole day set aside just for social media, and the rest of the week was work. I think it was
that would make
Kazu.
sense.
If nothing else, I admire Kazu's ability to just put his head down and get to work, kind of a thing. And I think it was him that he was like, "Oh yeah, I only check it once a week." And you're like, "Once a week? How do you do that?"
Wouldn't that be great though? Because think about it. How many times do you open up Twitter saying, "I wonder what's going on Twitter," and you open it up, and the answer is, nothing.
Yeah,
nothing at all. And then maybe something's going on Instagram. Not a damn thing here either. Well, Facebook, I'm sure it's really heating up on. I posted this morning, and nobody freaking cares. If you just waited till once a week, every time you open that up, you'd see a whole bunch of stuff because you'd have everything piled up there, all your notifications. Okay, I'm going to respond to this person, respond to that person.
Yep.
You'd have it all stockpiled for you.
And you know what's funny is I don't know, Brad, have you ever pulled out of if you've got a 3 or 4 day flu or cold or something, and you pull out of it. And you're like, all right, time to check my Twitter feed. And you click Twitter, and it says like 400 unread posts or something gigantic, right? That you haven't been catching up. And you're like, skip. You just go to whatever the newest one is. You're like, I'm not even going to catch up on that. Because you realize it's all ephemera. It's like all useless ultimately. It doesn't get you much. So anyway, all that is to say, I think limit the number of notifications that Brad and I have been saying that come to you. Limit it to the people. The most likely the people that are in your life trying to reach you. So your phone, your text, definitely, or those are on. Your emails, limit what's coming into your inbox and then keep those notifications on because emails can. But even then, I think Brad and I would say, be wary of responding to emails right away. They can wait hours, if not days. And then turn off all the push notifications, all the news, all the social media. None of that is so critical that it has to be done. Because you'll get to your grave and go like, well, that was a waste.
Yeah. You'll get to your grave and go, wonder if I'm missing any favorites on Twitter.
Yeah. What's trending right now on boy, nothing is more useless than what's trending on Twitter. Yeah. Oh boy, people check that. I was like, why? Who cares? I don't know. And I'm such an old man sometimes when it comes to social media.
Well, no, I'm telling you that when I finally wised up to turn notifications off, I found out I had a couple hours a day back in my usability chart.
It does
I got a lot of work done and all I did was turn notifications off because there was no temptation. And by the way, that somebody you got a Twitter notification. Okay, somebody clicked the heart button on your post. Well, there's nothing you can do with that. It's like, who cares? Thank you for clicking a heart button. That's the lowest level engagement. Half the stuff that you get notified on isn't even important. It's just there to distract you.
Right.
Hey, Dave, I've got something I want to share with you. You ready for this?
Let's do it.
This comes under the heading of thanks for the kind words, and it comes in from Patreon backer Andrew Bamer, who says, wait till you hear this. This is the best. He says, hey, I wanted to thank you guys real quick. Just had my first ever negotiation with a publisher after 5 years of doing independent comics. They had a clause in their contract that I didn't like, and they weren't offering enough. I guess I'm assuming reading in between lines, not offering enough money. I thought of what I'd learned from you guys over the years. 1, art has value. 2, contracts are a negotiation. And 3, the worst they can say is no. So I told them they needed to lose the paragraph I didn't like and I needed more money. And after about a week of back and forth, they gave me what I wanted. I was pleasantly surprised, and I have what I learned from you guys to thank for this victory.
Oh, that's great. Isn't really
that the best?
We've never had an email like that before. Someone it directly helped their bottom line. That's great.
And he found himself in this situation, and and exactly what happened is what I want to happen. You heard Dave's voice in your head, like the disembodied Obi-Wan saying, "Don't forget, Andrew, contracts are a negotiation. Art has value." He heard all those voices, and by golly, he got what he wanted. He went in there negotiated that contract, said, I don't like this, advocated for himself, and got a better payday at the end. That's like everything that ComicLab is about.
That is really good. And I like how you just channeled a note-perfect Obi-Wan voice for me in Andrew's head. Don't forget, Andrew. Don't forget the Hi, I'm Obi-Wan. I want you to know, if it's a bad clause, you have the right to line item out that clause out of the contract and go back to It's me, Obi-Wan, telling you to use the Force. Hi, I'm Brad Geiger being Obi-Wan. Hello, everyone.
Remember what us Jedis always say. Excelsior!
Yeah. Hello, I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi. You might know me as Old Ben. Anyway, I'm here to talk to you about contracts and how clauses can get inserted that no one is happy with. Anyway, remember, if they're going to put a bad clause in, they've got to pay for the right. And if they don't, then they take the clause out. Anyway, this has been Contract Negotiation with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Playing the part of Obi-Wan Kenobi is the understudy, Brad Geiger. Hello, everyone. The voice you did was great. Sorry. But yes, this makes me happy that we helped Andrew out with this specific thing because I think I've told this story before on ComicLab, but I was once hired to do a job for a small to middle-sized comic book company. And I didn't want to do the job per se anyway, so I was willing to just walk away, which is always a great place in contract negotiation when you're willing to just walk away.
Yes.
And so I kept crossing out and signing. I would cross out a specific clause in a contract, sign the pages, initial the crossouts, and note that it was crossed out, sign it, submit the PDF. And they kept saying, no, you crossed out clause 29. I was like, oh, yeah, no, I know. And so that's now null and void. And it got bumped up higher and higher and higher to a VP. And finally, literally, the president of the company called me, and he's like, hey, Dave, we don't understand. Why do you keep crossing out clause number 29? And I was like, oh, well, to answer your question, Jim, it's a terrible clause. So I crossed that out because that's unfair to any artist working. And no, I'm not going to sign that. Right. And he just there was a pause. He's like, all right, well, that's fine. Sometimes it was one of those situations where if you're willing to just hold the line, it can work itself out. But as I told him, I said, there are some clauses that well, I'll sign it. You just have to pay for the right for me to sign a bad clause like that. Right. And if you're not going to pay me, then you don't get a clause like that. So if you're going to pay me a pretty shitty wage, then you're going to not get a great clause on your behalf inserted into a contract. But if you pay me an amazing wage, you can go ahead and insert that kind of contract in there, right?
Yeah, and I'll live with it.
And I'll learn to live with it. Yeah, exactly. So, and that extends to rights issues, extends to revisions that they might require of you in the contract. That extends to if they pay for you, go ahead, let those clauses slide. But if they're not paying you, they don't also get the terrible clauses in the contract. So they can't get both. But anyway, I'm so glad that Obi-Wan Kenobi, as played by Brad Geiger, was helpful to you for those kind words. And remember, with the contract, you can either get the bad clause, but then they got to pay for it. Just to reiterate, I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi in your head. Or if they don't do the money, then they don't get the clause. Anyway, Luke, use the Force and fight Darth Vader. I've been Obi-Wan Kenobi. You have the best of days.
And fight Darth Vader.
There's sand people everywhere. I'll tell you what, they're in my trousers, too, with all this sand. Look at this. I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I'll be here all week.
I'll be here all week.
Excelsior, you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
That's right. Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of Webcomics.com and the cartoonist and creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my friend, I can't do it. And my friend Dave Kellett.
No, just channel Obi-Wan Kenobi. You were doing it perfect before. Jerk, I am. When a joke goes on so long that I get like a guilty sweat, I'm like, David, you're being a jerk. Stop it now.
Well, you're still my friend, Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And ComicLab this week was brought to you by the good folks at Wacom at wacom.com, the makers of the new Wacom One, and we thank them for their sponsorship. And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes was edited by our chum Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And ComicLab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/ComicLab. And because it's a special offer, I'm going to remind you Join us by 4th of July at the $5 level. You'll get 4 ebooks: How to Make Webcomics, the Webcomics Handbook, Drive Act 1, Evil Inc. Under New Management, and you'll also get Cocktails with ComicLab, the exclusive Zoom for $5 and up patrons. Better than Drinks with Diggs, as Brett had it. You'll also get every show episode early. You'll get 50 hours. I think it might almost be 60 hours at this point.
We got to go back and count.
Episodes. Yeah, going out just to patrons like yourself. And you'll also get to ask a question of the show. So join us. If the show has meant something to you and you want to get all this extra stuff, join us by the 4th of July and get the 4 ebooks, the Cocktails with ComicLab, the shows early, all the hours. And anyway, this show is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So we'll go ahead and say that as Brad Geiger doing Obi-Wan Kenobi. Patreon.com/ComicLab. Use the voice.
Boo.
Excelsior!